All right. Well, Carolyn, thank you so much for being here. We're just so excited to talk to you about this topic. Your voice has been so valuable for me personally, and I know to so many people who are listening right now. And so we're just so grateful to have you.
Well, I thank you for that, and I'm grateful to be invited here. There's so many wonderful people to talk to about all these important things, and I honor you for what you're doing.
Thank you. I wanted to just start with your book, with the beginning of the book. You talk about polygamy in the context of patriarchy, and it feels like that might be an important place to start this conversation. And there's this memorable line you say that you have felt a calling to help the human family cross the plains of patriarchy into the land of partnership.
Yeah,
And
right.
I love thinking of you as a pioneer in that way, and
Yeah,
thinking of all of us as pioneers in this work of creating partnership.
right. Thank you. And let's mention the title of that book in case somebody doesn't know. The
Yeah.
Ghost of Eternal Polygamy, subtitle, Haunting the Hearts and Heaven of Mormon Women and Men. So
Yeah.
that's what this is all about. And I wrote that, I think, believe 10 years ago is when all that happened. But
Wow.
yes, and I'm glad to give whatever context I can to this. I'm remembering a conversation I had many, many, many years ago with my friend Hugh Nibley, to drop name here. I wrote scripts for BYU Motion Pictures. And so I occasionally got to go up and visit with him in his office to clarify some things that we needed to know. So he and I got to be friends. And I'm remembering one day as we were talking, I told him I had been reading some things about ancient goddess worship. And he said, oh, yes. In fact, I'm going to read it from my diary here. Oh, yes. He said, the matriarchy. We all know something about the matriarchy. It preceded the patriarchy. Excuse me, Brother Nibley, I said, but we do not all know about the matriarchy. We are taught the patriarchy is like the air, it has always existed. No, 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 he said. We've had both, but they're perversions. Each is corrupt in its own way. We have to get beyond them both. Now, later on, Brother Nibley gave a talk called Patriarchy and Matriarchy. It's on the internet if anybody wants it. But the last lines were speaking again of the perversions. So one must choose between patriarchy and matriarchy until the Zion of God is truly established upon the earth. Now that's really interesting. He's suggesting that, we talk of ourselves as people who are creating Zion, but he's reminding us here that Zion is something above and beyond either patriarchy or matriarchy. And of course, we don't know matriarchy, but we are very steeped in patriarchy. And, the word that I guess that we could choose that would be better, the word that a lot of people are finding interesting today is the word partnership.
Mm.
And I believe that is our goal. We're moving through these these phases that Brother Nibley calls corrupt and perversions. And we're sort of doing our best to just manage the territory and lead us, hopefully, to something better.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so the subject that we're really looking closely at, which is polygamy, is a fruit of patriarchy. And from what I hear Brother Nibley saying here and what I believe, polygamy is a rotten fruit from a tree that also is not healthy.
I think one of the natural questions you must get all the time. Well, let me relate a story actually as to lead up to the question. I was sitting in elders quorum in college, so this is like a while ago, and one of the counselors in the elders quorum presidency was relating a conversation that he had had uh, with a church skeptic, and he said that this guy brought up polygamy, and he said, and I told him, we stopped doing that a long time ago, and marriage is between one man and one woman, and there's no more to it than that. And then the elders quorum president got up and said, well, there's a little more to it than that. And it was this really interesting moment where it was sort of like contrasted this view that we'd like to just sort of wash our hands of
Yeah.
it and act like it's not an issue anymore. It's something um, that we got rid of, a century plus ago, and yet it's not maybe totally gone. So when you get the question, why does this still matter? How do you answer?
It matters because it hurts us. It hurts us badly. And we're, when something hurts us or hurts our children, we immediately say that this is not okay. If people are in pain about this, and believe me, and you already know, I'm sure many, many people are in pain about this. And therefore, it matters. It matters deeply. And I used to be in pain about it greatly when I believed that it was a real phenomenon. But I'm no longer in pain about it because I have outgrown polygamy.
Mm.
I've put it away. It does not exist in my world.
And when someone says specifically, if it's, you know, if it's been disavowed in current church policy, why is it still causing pain?
But
How
it
do you address
hasn't been disavowed. And we know that every nice, young, blushing bride who goes to the temple, if she is aware, she knows that she is going in to be possibly a first wife, and that in the eternities, if she should die here and her husband should remarry, in the eternities, he would have two wives and she would be one of them. I have talked to so many women who have wept over that realization. And our church has done very, very little to address that pain.
I remember I just turned 40 just a couple of weeks ago, and I had this very spontaneous memory come back to me. Um, that sorry, hang on. I remember that I used to pray that I would just live to be 40 so that I could be the wife of Tim's youth, like be the one that he raised a family with. And I remember how visceral that fear was that like I I probably didn't have any choice about what our heaven family looked like, but it felt like I could if I could just be the wife that we raised an earthly family
Oh,
with, that there was something special about it. And I had I read your book right when it came out, and it was so painful. Like I read it again before we had this conversation, and I remember how I felt hearing the letters of all these women who like I resonated so much with what they were saying, with like this fear and this pain. And it was such a gift to read it again and feel like I it doesn't feel so present, and I feel like I've really just let it go. But when I turned 40, I remember just this it popped back into my mind like, oh, this weird deep relief, like, oh, I made it and I'm the wife, you know. And
Aubrey,
it's
I, I want to thank you for being right now this tremendously valuable visual aid to show us, in a beautiful face and a beautiful voice and a beautiful heart, the damage that has been done and continues to be done. And I love it that you still cry over this, because we should all cry about it. We should all stand up and yell about it. It is not okay that someone like you, or someone like the millions of LDS women who have to face the same thing, feel that way. And really, that it is astonishing to me that nothing has been done about this. Nothing.
I I want to address the feeling that I remember having, which was that I was afraid that choosing to reject this as something that I had to own and accept and be open to in my own life, that felt like this real compromise of obedience. It felt like it felt like something I just wasn't faithful enough to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and I imagine that that's still something that's happening in a lot of people's minds, that they would like to let it go. It feels abhorrent, but they feel like, later they'll be perfected and they won't have jealous human feelings and they'll be able to accept this. And so, can you just talk about how do you tell the difference between something you should reject because your divine nature is offended by it, and something that you should choose to subject yourself to and overcome because you're trying to perfect this weak thing that you are?
Oh,
Because that's the debate, right? Like it doesn't, I think that's why it feels messy.
boy. It's hard to address it that way because I have for so long in my own self put it in a place of error. So may I just give you my history with all of this, and then I
Yeah.
think you'll see
Yeah.
how I would respond. I pulled out a few things here from my early diaries. The very first thing that I wrote about polygamy was in October 3rd, 1956. I was a senior at BY High School in Provo, Utah.
Mm.
And the third entry that I wrote in this diary that I got on my birthday, the third entry was a short one. All day long, I was distraught about the idea of polygamy in heaven. And I remember that well. We had just had a class with our new seminary teacher who told us about his second marriage here, and he's married in the temple now to two women. He's sure he will receive them both in the celestial kingdom, and that this plural marriage is is the true celestial favorite, top of the line marriage if we're sufficiently worthy. I remember leaving that class and walking home with my heart broken, the first time my religion had ever broken my heart. And I lived with that for a long time. And I cried about that. I remember my English teacher gave us at BYU gave us an assignment to write a theme on a fate worse than death, and I wrote about polygamy because
Wow.
it is outlives death. It goes on forever and ever and ever. And he gave me an A on it. So I want to read an entry here from August 13th, 1961. I was a 21-year-old BYU student. I just finished rereading the 132nd section of the Doctrine and Covenants, that terrible revelation to Joseph Smith about the necessity of polygamy, along with the commentary. No just God, no God of love and sympathy would ever have inspired that. I am not able to pray. How can I bring myself to kneel in love and supplication before a God who recognizes me only as a tool and a possession for the use of his man? Quote, if any man have a wife and he teaches unto her the law of my priesthood as pertaining to these things, then shall she believe and administer unto him, or she shall be destroyed, saith the Lord your God. And I wrote in the diary somewhere that when I would have these interactions about polygamy, I would close my bedroom door so the family wouldn't hear me cry. Now, the fact that I, an excellent young woman, and you, a wonderful, beautiful young woman, who have shed tears and still might shed tears over the very fact of this it is proof enough that it is wrong. You and I are proof that it is wrong. Now, what I just read to you was August 13th, 1961. Here's the entry from the very next day, August 14th. The sun arose this morning, and so did I. The day carried a certain peacefulness, and so did I. Somehow there is something innate within me, a heart whose intuition is infinitely wiser than my own intelligence. Of all the things we have testimonies of, I want to recommend that we find a testimony of ourselves that we can believe wholeheartedly in our own hearts, the wisdom that is there. Because we know in our hearts when we're responding to something beautiful and true, and we know when we're responding to something that is not true.
I think the next question for me then is, what do you do with our past? Because we have these foremothers who who gave up everything. Some of them felt like they really were giving their lives in an effort to be obedient. And so how do you both honor what you know for yourself and also honor their lives and their choices and in a respectful and not dismissive way? Because I sometimes it just feels like it would be for nothing if I reject this, and like, was their sacrifice for nothing?
Or maybe we would be harming them if we were not beyond now. If we were not if we were at the same place that they were, it would be a shame. It'd be a crying shame, and they would cry for us. So I think we can say, we can look back at the history and with the best hearts that we can forgive all the people that we identify as bringing forth some things that were wrong. And the word is not forgive, but the people who had to bear it. But we can still admire them for doing what they felt they had to do within the confines of their experience. We can honor them for that without honoring whatever it was that they had to do that was so painful for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, without perpetuating or carrying their pain. Honor it without carrying it.
Yes, and as I fantasize about what's going on in the next world, and I have a great grandmother who uh, her husband finally decided to take a second wife after Brigham Young in a big conference at Paris, Idaho. I told all of the men that if they did not take a second wife, they would lose the wife they had when they arrived in the next. But that's wicked. That's wicked. We've got to get past this idea that certain people are perfect and certain people have all of the answers. There's mistakes been made by every important person on the face of the earth. End of story.
It's difficult to talk about polygamy without talking about Joseph Smith. And you, in your book, you actually spend quite a bit of time talking about Joseph, and even about the screenplay that you wrote about his life. And your genuine love for Joseph Smith comes through very strongly. And I wonder, could you speak to reconciling your love for Joseph with the establishment of this practice that you so vehemently disavow, and have even you called it wicked? So how do you, especially as a practicing Latter-day Saint, many Latter-day Saints revere Joseph as the most important prophet of the Restoration, who revealed so many important truths.
And I'm not going to give you any final, wonderful, complete answers on that, because there are not. But I was really glad that I was able to create in the Ghost of Eternal Polygamy a Joseph Smith that we could admire and love. And all of those things are true. He did amazing things. He was an amazing human. He did all kind, loving things. So all of that is true. And also true is the fact that he was not a perfect human being. And I, a very imperfect human being, am going to make perhaps an imperfect statement, but it's the best I've got. I think our dear brother Joseph made errors. And I believe that polygamy was the worst error that he ever made. I believe it was an error. And that's it.
I wonder if, well, I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but I think it might be helpful because so polygamy in a different way than it was for Aubrey, and I won't speak for you, Aubrey, but was the root of my faith crisis 15 years ago. And I don't think it was for all the right reasons necessarily, but what happened for me was I started to doubt that polygamy was instituted by divine force of some kind. And the most and as soon as you like called that into question, I think for most people this is probably true. The most obvious reason that Joseph Smith would have instituted polygamy is sexual desire. And if that is, and I think there's much more nuanced conversation, but to be had. So how might you talk to somebody that's in that place and says, okay, if I'm going to let go of polygamy being God ordained, then it seems pretty obvious why this happened.
Wow. I wish I could really, I wish they made some movies of exactly what was going on there, and so that we could see precisely Joseph's actions, and more than that, see Joseph's intentions. I am not wise enough to do that, and I certainly would agree with what you said, that it would appear that there would have to be some very physical kinds of interest that was happening there. And I believe that Joseph found a creative way to interpret that in a way that could let him feel better about it. That if I am feeling this, and I am a spiritual man and a prophet, what I'm feeling must be correct. Mm-hmm. So let me find a way to mold it and talk about it in a way that is a higher way than just I really am physically attracted to this woman. Mm-hmm. That makes a great deal of sense to me, that he was able to braid together his physical needs and his spiritual commitments.
How do you think about the role of a prophet if a mistake this big could be made, like a mistake that could affect your family so intimately? If that could really just be a mistake, then how could you ever trust a prophet?
Well, that just means that nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect. Well, we speak of Jesus as being perfect, and I'm very willing to give him that adjective. Yeah. But in general, nobody on the face of this earth is perfect. And we have taken the word prophet maybe beyond what it should be. Boy, we could go back in the Old Testament and take every other prophet that is there and find the outrageous, terribly wrong things that they did. Bloody things, sexual things. And yet we call them prophets. I think we could find errors in probably every one of the people we call prophets in the contemporary LDS church. We know that Brigham Young said very firmly, Black men will never receive the priesthood until the seed of every seed of Adam has received that privilege. Well, he was simply wrong. He did a variety of things that were wrong. And I believe we could probably examine maybe everybody that we call prophet and see some things that he said, oh, that's not working very well. So I don't look at anybody in the world to be shielded from the possibility of making errors. I think if we just breathe a little more easily and back up a little bit and don't hold on so tight to some of our words like prophet and perfect and whatever things that lead us to give up the validity of our own hearts as we look around and hopefully compassionately assess everyone and everything that we're looking at. And through that compassion, still be a little bit on guard to say, I am only accepting into my own heart and mind the things that pass the test for me of being godly things.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph Smith did many, many things. There were obviously very, very godly things. He would give away his boots time after time and come home. And I love him for all of that.
Yeah.
And I don't have the right to say I either bless him or forgive him for being wrong on polygamy. I have some thoughts in my heart. I've never had a vision of Joseph coming and talking to me and saying anything at all. But I just have a sense that Joseph, where he is now in a more perfected place, could feel the pain. And I myself, with no authority, believe that he would be very, very grateful to have that remedied by what is going on right here, by all of the things that we are doing in trying to say, do not let polygamy weigh you down. Do not let it destroy the closeness of your marriage. Do not, do not let it hold a place in your mind that pollutes all of the other good stuff that you're experiencing in your marriage, in your activity with the church, whatever. I think Joseph would be very grateful to have that removed. I believe that I am wise enough to know that suffering like that is not correct. It's not right, and it should not happen.
I think then the next important question that I felt like I had to wrestle with for a long time was that if that was true, could the church be true? However you want to define that.
Well, this word "true" is such an interesting word, and in the context that we're bringing it to right now, I would rather evaluate things not perhaps on, is this true, but is this good?
Mm-hmm.
The word good is related to the word God. And whatever is good is godly. Yeah. And so, I've spent many decades, in this church that I love, and that I have sometimes terribly resented because of, a variety of things. And I've thrown away a lot of things that perhaps most members of our church would say, well, this is a true thing. This is a true thing. I'm responsible only for my own self. And I have to work with my own personal judgment about goodness and godness. And really, I put the word true or only true or whatever sort of toward the back of the bus here. And I'm driving with the word good because I know what good is. Yeah. I know what godliness is. I do not know everything about God, but I know what I need to know about godliness. And I can know, I can feel when I am participating in something that is godly. It's very clear to me when I'm not, when I'm angry, when I have some hate, when whatever. So I'm a little wary of saying, well, if polygamy is true, if polygamy is not true, that means the church is not true. Well, if we take polygamy out of just take that out of the church, we still have a church that has tremendous goodness, meaning trueness, but maybe looking at it from a little different point of view.
Carolyn, one of my favorite parts of the book is where you address the various reasons that people have propagated over the years as to why polygamy may have been helpful or even necessary. Would you mind if we sort of, and you respond to each one, would you mind if we just throw a few of those at you and let you respond?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Number
As if
one.
I know everything. Go ahead.
Well, I was convinced by all of your arguments, so I just want you to repeat them. Number one is it was necessary to multiply and replenish the earth. When we often hear this in terms of like the church was in its fledgling stages and needed to grow very quickly in order to survive.
Well, I was surprised to learn in my research that in Utah during the big polygamy era, actually, women who were in monogamous marriages had more children than women who were in polygamous marriages. So that thing does not.
Wow. Okay, this is related, but I feel like the one I hear most often is that there were more women than men, especially widows in the
And
valley.
that's not true. I was also surprised to find the statistics that there have been that's just simply not true that there were more. I'm sure there were occasionally in places more women, but it was not a general thing that there was more women and we had to find a place for them.
What about just that it was a necessary part of the restoration of all things?
Well, right along with animal sacrifice, right along with we could list so many offensive things that happened in the name of God in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And we are in an age where we have the past to teach us and current light to inform us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think our job is to learn from the past and grab hold of those things that have proven themselves to be correct and helpful, and to just discard, throw off the wagon, throw off the handcart, those things that are not useful and that just boy us down. Now, Aubrey, your response and my response to what we experienced in the tremendous, upsetting, spiritual, emotional fear of polygamy that was and is still a vital part of the religion that we maintain and that we love, that is proof enough that it is wrong. Mm-hmm. It is simply wrong. And if civilization is smart, and we're not always smart, but we hold the things that the past that we can value, that would have served us, and we throw away those that have not served us and create new ways of looking at it. And in general, that's happened. We're vastly along the good path with many of the mistakes that we made with our Black sisters and brothers. We do learn from the past, but sometimes we learn slowly and with a lot of pain.
Yeah, and I love that you write in the beginning of the book that maybe this is ours to do, and we don't need to begrudge prior generations for not having healed or fixed everything, and this we each need a work to do, and this might be ours.
Yeah, this is the now, and every now has to do what's in front of them and not place a lot of resentment on the past.
Yeah.
Because the future is going to look back at us and say, how come they didn't get this thing fixed? Yeah. Well, we in the now can only see what is in front of us and learn from the past and hope for the future and do the best we can. Yeah. And we are not doing the best we can or the best that we should. with this subject that we're looking at right now.
Would
Can
you
I
talk about, oh, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I just wanted to ask one more of these reasons that people say polygamy might be necessary. And I want to ask about this one specifically because as a young person, prior to disavowing polygamy myself, it is the reason that I gave myself. And it is that in the celestial kingdom, I imagined that there would be more women that qualified than men. Basically, I looked around and I saw that most wars, most sexual violence, most murder was committed by men. And I said, well, it looks like for whatever reason, women have the edge in righteousness. And so uh, there's going to be this imbalance that polygamy corrects. And obviously, I think if I hadn't been trying to justify it, then I probably wouldn't have gone down this path in the first place. But I was trying to justify it. So how do you think about that one?
Well, I think we have drawn our pictures of what heaven looks like. And now here's our degree, and here's our degree, and and I think we have, taken something that is huge and cut it up into little sections that we think we can understand better. And I'm I just feel so much happier if I release a lot of these expectations that I grew up with. I think God, who is our mother, father, divine source, are better than that, smarter than that. I think everything is going to be more grand, more glorious, more welcoming than we can even imagine. I leave that in good hands. In my early phases of trying to figure out God, I was not in good hands because in my mind, God was not good.
Mm.
But I have grown up. And when I consider what the divine must be and the mother father essence being that brought me here, I can trust that. And so I just trust, when I do things I feel bad about, I'm not going to do them again. When I do things I feel good about, yeah, that's the road I'm going to take.
Mm.
And I don't worry one iota about where I'm going to be placed when I get to the next life. Never occurs to me. I trust God a lot more than I did when I gave up all the arithmetic. Somehow or other, God, our heavenly parents, God being love, God is love. That's the best definition I've ever heard. I'm just try to keep that in mind. God being love is going to find some way for all of us to have an appropriate, loving relationship with everyone we have loved on earth. And how that looks beyond that is not my business. It just isn't my business.
What what does it mean in your mind, Carolyn, to fix this, to address it? Like what can we do right now?
We can do exactly what we're doing right now. We have to be brave enough to stand up. And before I published that book, I asked for a meeting with my stake presidency. I wanted all three of them there. I wanted their wives there. I had this meeting of these six excellent people. I told them exactly what I was doing about this book. I read to them some of the horrendous stories that had come to me through that survey. And they were all enthusiastic about what I was doing and helpful.
Mm.
And I've talked about my issues to every one of my priesthood leaders, my bishops, my stake presidents. I've never had a bad experience with a bishop or a stake president.
Wow.
The best thing to do is not to do your stuff undercover and just hint at things. Come out and be brave. And I'm a lucky one. But nevertheless, we do what we have been called to do.
Mhm.
And I would wish that many people would be listening to our words here. And they would be saying, yeah, I understand. I can do something. I can have a conversation here. I can maybe write a letter. But we just have to be brave. We must be brave, and that's it.
If I'm trying to imagine a world where church leadership decides to truly disavow polygamy, it presents a number of at least difficult logistical issues. It upends a lot of the way that we've understood our families being tied together, um, going back until the beginnings of the church. How would you propose that those who would be tasked in this theoretical world with undoing some of those difficult details?
Well, it would be a very tough thing to figure out how do we disavow polygamy and not hurt a lot of people and not make ourselves look bad. If polygamy is disavowed, it would be a brilliant, generous move that would be painful.
Mm.
But you either take that opportunity or let Aubrey cry again as she remembers the pain that she went through, and let me remember the times that I wept in my bedroom and shut the door so my family could not listen. The brethren should be horrified that Aubrey and Carol Lynn and millions of faithful Latter-day Saint women and girls are now and in the predictable future going to go through the same emotional agony. And I pray with all my heart that they will take that seriously and find a way to do something that is correct and right and true and godly, and wash our history of something that is damaging so that we can all be brighter and clearer and cleaner with how do we interact with our church, with our leadership. We'll be trailing clouds of dismal darkness as we go. We will. This should happen and must happen. And it is up to us who are feeling the pain to say this has got to happen.
Just very recently, you wrote about the church's new curriculum that for primary children on polygamy, and it's sort of framed during this week where the lesson is about having faith to obey the law of the Lord even when it's hard. And you've expressed some real concern about that message for children and particularly what it implies about when a man of authority tells you what God wants. And so I think this is a hard question for a lot of parents. It's scary to feel like you are invested and you believe and you're here to stay and you want to teach your children to love and value the church, but also not pass on this really problematic message that you should override your own internal compass when an authority figure disagrees with you.
Yeah.
So how do you teach children about this era of our history?
Right over there on my wall, I have a photograph of me playing Joan of Arc on the BYU stage. And I think Joan would like to answer the question that Joan has already answered the question what do you do when someone who has ecclesiastical authority over you demands that you honor the way they see things and give up the way you see things? We honor Joan. We do not honor the Catholic cardinal who was trying to insist that she declare herself wrong and him right. we honor that. And I think we still do, even though we might fudge a little bit here and there and say, oh, well, let's just go along, Don't make a big deal out of it. Just when somebody in authority tells you, I'm remembering a time when my two boys were fairly new deacons, and they brought home a handout from the priesthood class. And I read it, and I sat them down and I read it out loud to them. And the message on the handout was that if you're told to do something by your priesthood leader, by the president of the church or your priesthood leader, and you don't think it's right, you do it anyway. And if it turns out to be wrong, the blame will be on him and not on you. And I said to my boys, what you learned in church today is wrong. And I want you to know that if ever anyone, including your mother, should ever tell you to do something that in your heart, in your conscience, is not a correct thing to do, you must not do it. Now, I think that is a much higher law than this thing of being obedient to somebody who has been placed in our organization over us. We cannot blame anybody for things that we do that are not in line with our own moral, spiritual compass. We have to be Joan of Arc all the time and say, go ahead, burn me at the stake center. But we admire people. Some of the great movies have been people who have said no. And so we must say no when we know that it's wrong.
As we maybe just to wrap up, I would just love to know what you hope right now for where we are in this point in our history. What's your prayer for our community on this issue?
My hope and my prayer on the particular issue of the remnant of polygamy in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is that every woman who has the kind of empathy that you and I have expressed here of how we feel about the damage that it did to us as young people, that we become brave enough to talk about that, to talk about it with the husbands, to talk about it with children, to talk about it with our ecclesiastical leaders. I have talked to my ecclesiastical leaders consistently about the things that are important to me, including this particular subject. And so I hope that the women of our church will become more brave. Just become a little braver. Be able to say, I feel strongly about something, and I need to verbalize it, and I need you to take this seriously, and not just slough it off and say, well, that's just church doctrine. You have to obey it no matter what. We have to be brave enough to say, no, that does not resonate with the godliness that I know is in me. I wish and I pray that every LDS woman who understands what we have talked about here, about the damage that the ongoing ghost of polygamy does to our community, would be brave enough to do her part in calling this what it is, which is an error, which is something painful. And I wish that every man would be able to look at the same circumstance and say, this is not right. This does not feel good. I'm going to do what I can in my space in my conversations, in my letter writing, in whatever, to do my part for the women that I love, and for me as a man, to try to lift this burden that has damaged millions of wonderful LDS people and continues to. There has to come an end to it. And it will only come when enough of the membership down here find their own way to say, no, I can't support that. I deserve better. We all deserve better. And let us do better.
Thank you so much for the book and for your bravery for modeling, what it can look like to really own our own connection to God and speak about that with so much confidence. It's just been you've really been such a healing voice in my life. So grateful to get to talk to you.
Thank you for inviting me to talk on this. This
Thanks, Carolyn.
is a vital thing. And I so appreciate you giving your own voices and inviting my voice. And may we all use our voices.
All right, thanks so much for listening. We really hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Carol Lynn Pearson. We also wanted to mention that Carol Lynn's personal diaries are now being published as a multi-volume series by Signature Books, and Volume 1, which covers the years of 1956 to 1990, was just released. You can find The Diaries of Carol Lynn Pearson at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. Thanks again for listening.